explanation. So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is digital money. And in order to understand Bitcoin, we first have to start with what is money. And money has two properties. It is a store of value and it is a medium of exchange. And if you go all the way back to ancient Roman times, every single money has served as a store of value and a medium of exchange. Now, ultimately, the things that have served as money have evolved throughout the years. So we had everything from precious metals to seashells to paper, claims on commodities, all kinds of different things. But at the end of the day, money is a belief system, right? Especially in a fiat world. If you think of the US dollar, it is simply the belief between two people that that thing that is being transacted, that dollar that is being exchanged for a good or service has value. If the two parties do not believe that it has value, then it is not money because it cannot be used. If both parties believe, then it is money. So that is what money ultimately is. Money is a belief system. And what we've seen is it serves as a store of value and a medium of exchange. And so Bitcoin is merely digital money. If you think back before the internet, there was all sorts of analog businesses. When the internet came along, we simply took the idea of those analog businesses and we put it on the internet. We made some changes, we improved things, we made some tweaks, but what we did was we took business that existed in the analog world and we put it on the internet. We digitized the business. What Bitcoin is Bitcoin is taking the idea or concept of money and it is just digitizing or putting it into the digital world. Now, we've made a lot of improvements. We've made a lot of tweaks to kind of existing money to Bitcoin, but that's ultimately what we're talking about. It is simply digital money. And so how does Bitcoin work? Bitcoin works off of the same exact concept that Monopoly works on. So what I like to talk about is Bitcoin uses a transparent public ledger. And those are big fancy words that people use to try to sound smart. But what exactly is a transparent public ledger? It's simply, if you were playing Monopoly and you have four people sitting down in front of the board game, everybody sets up the board, you take the money and you put it out in front of you on the table, and then there's a bank. And that bank is a collection of all of the money that's not in an individual's, in front of them on the board. And the reason why there's only four people who are playing Monopoly, but you don't have a banker, is because there's full transparency in the game. So if I roll the dice and I pass go, I reach in the bank and I take $200. Everyone at the table can see that I took the $200 and I put it in my bank. If all of a sudden I buy a property or somebody buys one of my properties, the exchange of funds at the game is all done publicly and transparently for everyone to see. Because it's public and transparent during the game of Monopoly, there's no need for a third party or some sort of authoritative figure, right? When you're kids, you don't need your parents to sit over you and say, okay, Johnny, give the $200. It's just known that the four players at the table can understand because it's a public transparent system. Now, in the legacy fiat system, right, in the legacy finance system, almost every single transaction that occurs, whether it is with money or other financial assets, there is a centralized third party. All that means is if I want to do a transaction with you, I take the asset that I have and I go to give it to you, but I can't give it directly to you. I have to give it to somebody else who gives it to you. They process the transaction. And so ultimately what you and I are doing when we enter into a transaction or an agreement is we are trusting that that centralized third party is going to do what we want them to do. But in some cases, they don't do what we want them to do. They may go rogue. They could steal. They could do something that they claim that we don't fit their profile, and so they don't want to process the transaction, all kinds of different things. But one of the points of failure in the legacy system is that we have to trust this third party, this centralized system. Bitcoin, one of the improvements it made was the public transparent ledger. And that public transparent ledger meant that nobody had to trust a centralized third party. I now can transact directly with you across the Bitcoin network, and no one or nothing can stop us from transacting. It is a fully decentralized system. Decentralized just means nobody's in control. So a lot of people, when they hear that the Bitcoin system is decentralized and no one's in control, the first question is, well, how does that work? So essentially what is going on is Bitcoin was launched on January 3rd, 2009. And when it was launched, every single transaction that has ever happened is on a public ledger, right? If you go back to the Monopoly game, it would be like every time there was money trading hands, either from the bank to a player or from player to player, there was one of the players sitting there and they wrote down the transaction. So Johnny gave Sarah $200 and they wrote it down on a piece of paper. On the next line, Sarah gave Anthony $100, right? And every single transaction just got written down. But after 10 minutes of playing, we said, wait a second, rip off that piece of paper from the notebook and put it to the side. That would then start us writing down the transactions for the second 10 minutes of the game. And if every 10 minutes we ripped off the piece of paper and simply stacked it on the last piece of paper, at the end of the game, we would have an entire pile of paper where we could go back and we could look at every single transaction that happened in the Monopoly game. And we could even go to the exact time. So if we said, hey, between 7:10 p.m. and 7:20 p.m., I think I gave you $300. We could go back in the transactions and we could find 7:10 to 7:20, and we could find that exact transaction written down. That's what the Bitcoin blockchain does. And that's a very overgeneralized example. But ultimately, what the Bitcoin blockchain does is every single transaction that happens in about a 10-minute block gets written down digitally, and then it gets blocked together. So there's a block, right, or a group of these transactions, and it's kind of tied up in a 10-minute block. And then that block is tied to or connected to the last 10-minute block. So the Bitcoin blockchain is simply a chain of blocks that hold transactions in them. And each block contains about 10 minutes worth of transactions, and they're all just chained together. So the 10 minutes that's occurring right now, when it's over, we will take all the transactions that happen in that 10-minute period, and we're going to chain it to the last 10 minutes. And you can go all the way back to January 3rd, 2009, and you can see every single transaction that's occurred. So part of the beauty of this system is not only that nobody owns it, nobody controls it, but also that anyone in the world can go and see every single transaction, right? Again, it's a fully public, transparent system. And so this entire idea of Bitcoin is built on something that people refer to as trustless. And what that means is you don't have to trust the system. You don't have to trust a centralized third party. You actually don't even need to trust the person that you're transacting with. Everything that you need to do, you can verify, right? There, you can go and find the truth. And what I mean by that is when I send a wire at a bank, I'm trusting that the bank's not going to take my money, that the bank is actually going to give it to the right person, and that the bank or the recipient's bank is going to accept the money. So I'm trusting multiple parties in that transaction. Here, I don't have to trust anybody to send it. I don't have to trust anybody's bank to receive it. And I can actually go verify that the money was sent, right? The Bitcoin was sent, and I can verify who received it, how much, and I can even see what they do with it. And so when you kind of go through this system, it is a public, transparent system that is not owned by anybody. It's fully decentralized.